Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's training on APS. My name is Gabrielle Pasquale. I'm the Clinical Training Manager here at Western Tidewater CSB, and I just want to welcome everybody virtually that is in attendance. We are recording this presentation today, so if your colleagues are not able to view it, I will be sending out an audio recording at the conclusion of the training, probably tomorrow. So just so everybody knows, anything you type in the chat will be recorded. Going along those lines as well, you guys will notice only myself and Carrie have video capabilities this presentation. We're expecting about 200 folks, so because of that, we're the only ones that will have video. You also will not have any audio besides just hearing myself and Carrie's voices. So if you need to talk to us, which we would love for you to be able to talk to us, please type in the chat. There are two features. There's one which is the chat feature, and the second is the question and answers feature. Throughout the presentation, if you do have questions, you can either type it into the chat or type it into the Q&A, and I will be moderating that for Carrie. There will also be a possibility at the end, actually there is a guarantee at the end, where if you do have questions, we will be able to answer those as well. I think that is all for the housekeeping that I have, so I'm going to go ahead and read Carrie's bio real quick, and then I will pass it on off to her. So Carrie Rayleigh has a master's degree in social work and is a certified geriatric care manager with over 25 years experience working with older adults and adults with disabilities in our area. She's worked in a variety of settings and has been with the state for a decade as a regional consultant for APS. So without further ado, I will go ahead and pass it off to Carrie. And if you guys have any questions or things for me, type it in the chat, okay?
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. It's a pleasure to be here today to speak with you all. I was asked to give a presentation on adult protective services, the basics, so that folks would know a little bit more about APS and what to expect after making a report and things like that. And then, of course, as Gabrielle mentioned, we can do some question and answers and stuff at the end or in the middle of the presentation. Again, I'd like to thank you all for being here today. So the philosophy of adult protective services is to advocate for the capable adult, to determine least restrictive interventions, and to preserve adults' rights to make decisions for themselves. And we consider legal action only after we pursue all other, alternatives. We try to explore other alternatives before seeking any type of legal action. With adult protective services, we are state supervised and locally administered through 120 different local departments of social services. I'm sure each of you out there knows which local departments you kind of come in contact with. I am, as Gabrielle stated, the Eastern Regional Consultant, so I cover 23 of those cities and counties out of the 120 throughout our state. Our practice is based on policy, and policies developed in response of, to the Code of Virginia, which is our state law, and different agency regulations. Our funding is 80% state, 20% local, and unlike child welfare programs, there's absolutely no federal funding for adult protective services anywhere in the country, actually. However, I will say that come April, maybe May, there is going to be a little bit of federal funding through, for some COVID relief and resources. So that'll be interesting. It'll be our first federally funded stream of money coming. So that'll be interesting to see how all that plays out. And hopefully that means that we will see more in the future for other program services that we may be able to provide. Adult protective services population, we serve people who are 60 and older or 18 and older, who are incapacitated, who've been abused, neglected, or exploited, or are at risk of being abused, neglected, or exploited. And we serve people from all socioeconomic backgrounds, so basically, without regard for any income or resources. Incapacitated for us are adults who are impaired by mental illness, intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities, advanced age, and some other causes. And the definition based out of the Code of Virginia is to the extent that the adult lacks sufficient understanding or capacity to make, communicate, or carry out reasonable decisions regarding their well-being. Some people may receive a disability check, but they might not meet our definition of incapacitated. So we do have to take a look at that when receiving reports on folks who are 18 and older. So who can report to APS? Really, anybody can. There are voluntary reports. Anyone who suspects that a vulnerable adult has been or is at risk of being abused, neglected, or exploited can make a report. And then there's self-reports. A lot of people will call us themselves and say that they really just don't know what to do or where to turn or how to improve their situation. And then there's mandated reporters. The Code of Virginia requires that certain individual has been or is at risk of being abused, neglected, or exploited. So who are mandated reporters? The Code of Virginia 63.2-16 that report and neglect or exploitation is occurring. You do report immediately when you have that suspicion, and any person who fails to make that report can be subject to a civil penalty. I believe everyone on this call, if I understand the population that's on this call correctly, everyone here is a mandated reporter. We have doctors, dentists, nurses, guardians, social workers, law enforcement, mental health professionals, really anyone who's employed by or contracted with an agency that, public or private agency or facility who works with adults in administrative, supportive, or direct care capacity. Any person providing full, intermittent, or occasional care to an adult. So that could even be like a companion, home, homemaker, chore, personal care, those types of folks. And then we do have mandated reporter training, and that has actually recently been updated, and it is posted on the DARS public website. And this is the link you can go to, or you can even just Google Adult Protective Services Virginia or something like that, and it will take you, or you can go to DARS, just the straight up DARS website. And then follow dated reporter training. I think it lasts, well, I know it's under an hour, but I feel like it might be 30 minutes. So that's a good thing, especially since it's recently been updated. So to make an APS report, you call your local Department of Social Services where the abuse, neglect, or exploitation occurred or was discovered. And if they're not the one of jurisdiction, they can forward that to the proper city or county, or provide you with the phone number to call the other city or county. Or there's an 888 toll-free 24-hour hotline that you can call to make a report, and that number's here. Reporters have rights. You have the right from any civil or criminal liability. Your identity is protected. The identity of the reporter is never released unless the reporter states that it's okay to release that information. And typically the local departments or the hotline are supposed to, mention that it could be with other entities that might do a joint investigation with us. Or it might be to the client themselves or their family members. Most reporters, it's personal to them as to whether or not their identity is shared. But if the conversation is not had, just know that your identity is not going to be shared with anyone. Even when we send the information off to the other entities, the reporter information is not included in that in that information that we send. There are occasions where people make malicious reports, and any person who's 14 or older who makes or causes to make a report that he or she knows to be false could be, found guilty of a class 4 misdemeanor, and then any subsequent convictions could be a class 2 misdemeanor. In this presentation, I put like all of the Eastern region because I'm pretty sure everyone on this call is in the Eastern region. There might be some folks that might fall into Central or, I guess it would be Central. And if ever you need, a phone number or anything like that, you're more than welcome to email me or contact me, and I can point you in the right direction if you're not sure who to call or which agency it belongs to. Some characteristics of a valid report would be that the person is 60 or older or 18 and older with that, incapacity, the disability that renders them incapacitated. The circumstances have to describe an allegation of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. The report needs to needs to list an address or provide at least enough information where we can find and locate the adult, because we do get some reports on some homeless folks on occasion. But we are going to the corner of there, what time might they be there? Or the agency receiving a report has to be the agency of jurisdiction. We can even take John Does and Jane Does if people don't know the client's name. But again, we need to be able to find them, identify them, and all of that. So what is abuse? Abuse definition is the willful infliction of physical pain, injury, or mental anguish or unreasonable confinement of an adult. The key word in that definition is willful. Sometimes accidents happen and somebody might get injured, but where's the intent? Are they intending to hurt that person or injure that person? Some indicators would be multiple or severe bruising, fractures, somebody being overly medicated, people being restrained inappropriately, people being isolated from other family members or loved ones or friends. And what is neglect? So on this slide, I have neglect on one side and self-neglect on the other. So on the left-hand side, neglect is an adult who's living in circumstances that he or she's not able to provide for him or herself, or is not being provided the services that are necessary to maintain their physical or mental health. Failure to receive those services can impair or threaten to impair their well-being, and that again is based off the Code of Virginia. Some indicators of neglect are untreated medical dirt, flea, lice, things like that on the person, soiled bedding and furniture, along with another, it's a large list of things that can indicate some neglect is going on. Self-neglect is when the adult themselves is not meeting their own basic needs related to their mental and physical health, and basic needs referring to like food, shelter, clothing, their health and medical care, including mental health care. And this is the most common type of APS report that we receive. What is exploitation? Exploitation is the illegal use of an incapacitated adult or their resources for another person's profit or advantage. The most common type of exploitation would be financial exploitation. But we even have like trafficking with people just using folks' social security checks and things like that. I remember there was a story even up in Pennsylvania that they uncovered, like, I want to say it was like 10 adults that had severe mental health issues, as well as some older adults that they had in a basement. They were giving them the bare minimum, and they just had them there, and they were just cashing their checks. It was disgusting, but it happens. Appearance of funds, misuse of money or property by another person. All of a sudden, you know, a lot of times there's like, all of a sudden so-and-so has like a new best friend, or the long lost cousin shows up out of nowhere, or they've been not in contact with even their own child for 20 years. And the next thing you know, the kid's showing up and they're getting power of attorney, and now the bills aren't getting paid, and the loved one now has, you know, a brand new car and, you know, whatever else, and they're not even working. So, you know, they're probably, you know, using their loved one's income to help themselves. Sometimes people say, but I have power of attorney, so, you know, I have access to their account and I can do whatever I want. Well, that's not true. Power of attorney does not give you what we call license to steal. You know, a power of attorney is supposed to use the other, you know, have that fiduciary responsibility to make financial decisions and spend the money as the person would themselves. So we see people abusing the powers of that power of attorney quite frequently. So what happens after you make a report? We initiate an investigation within 24 hours of receiving the report. An unannounced face-to-face visit is done within the first 5 days of receiving that report. It might happen sooner than that 5 days. It depends on what the report is. Sometimes they have immediate response level, and sometimes, you know, they might go out within the first 24 hours of receiving that report, and sometimes it might be the very next day. But, you know, is my internet connection okay? I just got an alert that says I might have an unstable internet connection.
Sometimes your sound is going a little bit more intensive and then it goes in and out a little bit.
Weird. Okay. I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure what to do to fix that.
If you get cut off, I'll stop you and we can always have you call in, because that's what I do.
Okay.
So if you want me to give you the number, I can also have you call in as well.
Okay.
Some other people are saying you're kind of cutting in and out too.
Okay. Sorry. I don't normally, I wonder if it's because of the amount of people. I'm not sure. But normally it's okay. So I apologize for that. So we have 45 days to complete an investigation once we receive that report. Sometimes we can extend it, just to extend it past that 45 days. A lot of times reporters might get upset that they're not getting more information from the worker during the investigation. But what people don't understand is, because of confidentiality, there's very minimal information that we even really can share, even with a reporter. But at the end of the investigation, you are supposed to receive a letter that notifies you of the disposition of that report, whether or not it was unfounded or, you know, not substantiated, not enough evidence to support the allegation, or that there was enough evidence to support the allegation, and that it was, you know, that services were at least offered. So some of the dispositions that, you know, the dispositions that we have, one of them is needs protective services and accepts. And that is when a review of all the facts and the evidence that we're able to gather shows a preponderance of evidence that it has occurred, is occurring, or there's at least reason to suspect that the risk is there. And so then we offer services, protective services, in order to try to minimize that risk or reduce the risk, or remove the risk would be ideal. Needs protective services and refuses is when we do still have, all that preponderance of evidence and such. But the adult who has capacity to make decisions for themselves refuses those services that we're offering. If they refuse those services, then we have to close the case. Then there's a disposition called needs protective services no longer exists. And that's when during the course of the investigation, so during that 45 days, it's looking like there's a preponderance of evidence, but someone else does something that then, kind of reduces that risk, and the person ceases to, have that risk. So an example might be if there was a report about self-neglect, let's say, and they were living alone and all of this other stuff, maybe they go then live with a daughter, or maybe a family member helps get them admitted to, let's say, an assisted living facility or a nursing facility, and that's what, removes that risk. We didn't have anything to do with that change, someone else did, and so then the need no longer exists. I hope that makes sense. I hope I explained that correctly. And then we have unfounded, which the facts we don't quite have enough evidence to show that preponderance level, that abuse, neglect, or exploitation has occurred, or that they're at risk of that. This disposition is also used when we're unable to make contact with someone that we're just not able to get the information that we need to show that preponderance of evidence. There are times we get reports and we're out there knocking on people's doors and we see that they're home. We know they're home and they're not answering the door and they're not letting us in. Or they're not home and we leave a note and they don't call us. We go back 4 times. We'll go back, most localities will go back weekly, trying different times a day, trying to, get in touch with that resident or the client. They might call them, they might send a letter, they'll go out to the house several times. So sometimes we're not able to make contact with them. So just a few quick statistics for you. I was saying how self-neglect is the highest number. You'll see here, 54% of the amount of substantiated reports that we received were self-neglect. Let's see here. I can't see the total because the screen's blocking the bottom, but anyway, so moving on to rights of the adult. Adults with capacity do have the right to refuse services, even if every single person involved in their life believes that assistance is needed. If they have the capacity to refuse those services, we have to respect that. And the adult is in charge of their own decision-making until that is delegated voluntarily to another person via like a power of attorney for healthcare and or financial powers of attorney, or if they're lacking capacity and we go to court and the court grants that responsibility to another person like a guardian or conservator. Adults have the right to be, and I think you guys have these same rights, or at least similar, that adults have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. They have the right to refuse treatment and assistance. They have the right to make their own choices about how and where they will live, self-determination, autonomy, all of that stuff. And they have the right to privacy. And so adults with capacity do have the right to make bad decisions. I'm sure every single one of us on this call today actually have made some decisions in our life where some people who are either our friend or family member or our parents and might disagree with something that we've chosen. So we're all guilty of making bad decisions at times. So, there's a lot of misconceptions about APS and what we can do and what we can't do. So one of the things is we can't force protective services on an adult who has the capacity to refuse our services. We also can't take an endangered adult into our custody, and we can't investigate when the alleged victim is no longer at risk. So a lot of times people think that we have these magic placements for folks, like I guess there's like a magic nursing home somewhere where we can put the difficult people, or assisted living facilities. We don't have, unlike child welfare even, we don't have the ability to go and remove someone from their home and have these like foster care places that we can put folks. And the fact that, we can't do things. Members of loved ones who frequently want, something to be done about the situation, especially when they know the person and they see the situation, they know it's escalating and they know it's about to get out of control. And they just wish that we could swoop in and kind of make it all better. But there are certain situations where we just can't. A lot of times I get phone calls because I'm the Eastern consultant. A lot of times I get the constituent calls where, APS went out there, but then they didn't do anything. And so a lot of times I have to look into it and see, well, what was the report? Does the client have capacity? What did the worker do? What didn't the worker do? And all of that stuff. And sometimes the worker actually tried everything. And it was that the adult has capacity to make decisions and they didn't want any help. And so we kind of had to respect that. And because of confidentiality, and we can't really explain to people exactly what all went on, a lot of times people just don't understand that we tried, but we just couldn't get them to agree. What we can do, though, is we can receive and evaluate these reports for an investigation. We can investigate all the valid reports that we do get. We can try to help, we then help determine whether or not services are needed. We offer them, and we provide a wide array of services. If the adult with capacity agrees to accept that assistance, we refer clients to a variety of community resources that are available in their community. We make a disposition. We notify the reporter once the report has been investigated and that's completed. We can also refer cases for prosecution. It's not up to us whether or not they are prosecuted, but we can at least refer them for prosecution. We do refer to other regulatory agencies for investigation. And like with you guys, the Department of Behavioral Health, we refer to them quite often when there's concerns about like group homes or, things like that. And then like with nursing homes, it's the Office of Licensure and Certification. With assisted living facilities, it's DSS licensing. And then of course there's ombudsman, there's the Department of Health Professions, and another, there's a whole list of entities that we, refer to. We try to help strengthen informal and formal support systems. We can help obtain emergency orders, medical order, an emergency medical order or protective orders when those are needed and warranted. Of course, we oftentimes have to rely on you guys for help with getting like TDOs and ECOs, and providing legal intervention for guardianship or conservatorship if that's warranted and it's the, like an intervention of last resort. So actually that does bring us to the conclusion of the like presentation that I put together to go over the basics with you all. I'm sure that there are questions that you all have. And I'm sorry for going in and out with the sound. I apologize for that. I don't know why that happened.
So there is one question. Somebody said self-neglect cases. How are those cases addressed by APS?
For self-neglect, well, I mean, so we go out to whatever setting that the client is in, and we start, the investigation process includes, assessing their situation, observing the setting that they're living in, trying to assess their capacity to the best of our ability. If they have questionable capacity, we will try to get them to have a neuropsych evaluation or communicate with their primary care physician to try to gain a better understanding from a medical professional what their capacity may be. There's no cookie cutter answer to every single thing because everybody's an individual. Every situation has so many different pieces and parts to it, but we assess the situation in a holistic manner. So even if there was a report for someone not eating, when we go out to their house and we're looking at their food situation, do they have food? Is it that they're not hungry? Is it that they can't prepare the food that they do have? Maybe we have to get them some food and figure out, is it just that they can't get to the grocery store anymore? And if that's the case, what do we need to do to help link them with someone who can bring them food? Is it Meals on Wheels? Is it, so I'm just using that one thing as an example. But if you have we assess to the best of our ability all things. Does that, I hope that answers that person's question. Also, we try to, let me expound on that actually. We gather as many what we call collateral contacts as we can, trying to talk to any family members or friends or loved ones. We might even talk to a neighbor or any professionals that might be involved with the person.
So we got a couple more questions. I think we got 6 so far, so we'll try to go through them. Is there any way you can find out if an adult with capacity is not being threatened by someone else who has prevented him or her to accept the service?
Like undue influence maybe, or like you're saying, I'm going to assume that they're saying maybe there's someone who's threatening them, telling them you better not do this or that. We interview them individually. We interview the alleged perpetrator individually. Again, sometimes it's even just, you might have to get creative. If the alleged perpetrator refuses to leave the room, if you can get a coworker to come with you, and then that coworker can take the alleged perpetrator into another room so that you can have a one-on-one with the client. We do those types of things, and we'll ask the clients, sometimes you can just get a sense. Sometimes people have overheard the threats. Hopefully that answers the question. We do try to get them alone so that we can gather the information. With COVID in the beginning, I think it was a little bit more difficult with some situations because of, talking to people on the phone rather than going out in person, but we are going out in person for APS for the most part now, unless there's a reason not to. And we try to do the virtual, from what I understand from the localities. They're doing their best to have the one-on-ones.
Okay. Somebody else said, who determines if a person has the capacity to make decisions, medical care versus financial?
Okay, so if their capacity is in question, you know, and most of, if we know who their primary care physician is, we'll have conversations with the primary care physician. If there's other medical professionals involved, we'll, you know, try to communicate with them either by, you know, sending them a letter or calling them. If we, sometimes that's why an investigation might last longer than 45 days, because we're having a difficult time getting information back from the medical professional. And if, you know, we try to get people to go for the neuropsych evaluations, so that, you know, they can, oh my gosh, so cute. We try to get the evaluations by the medical professionals whenever possible, if their capacity is in question. There are times when folks refuse to go and they have just enough that we can't get any kind of like court order to make that happen. And so we kind of have to just wait until maybe the next time an APS report comes in. You know, we try to develop the best rapport that we can to try to convince people to go ahead and have these evaluations done when they're needed. But there are times that, you know, we can't get the proof that we need or want.
Let's see. How would you suggest to intervene with a client who's been placed in a jail secondary to what appears to be lack of capacity and will likely get out of jail fairly quickly?
Say that again.
How would you suggest to intervene with a client that's been placed in a jail secondary to what appears like lack of capacity and they will likely get out of jail fairly quickly?
I'm not sure if I really know how to answer that question. Really, other than we don't handle it differently just because the person's in jail. You know, we still do our investigation, you know, and try to get as much information as we can. And if they had a situation at home or something that led them to getting there, I don't know if I know how to answer that question to the exactly what they're referring to. We don't handle it any differently just because they're in jail. Of course, it's been 10 years since I've carried a caseload, so
somebody else asked, what is the role of APS? The client's in a psych hospital, but the alleged abuse occurred before the hospitalization.
Right. So in some of those situations, if the abuse, neglect, or exploitation, if the risk or the abuse, neglect, or exploitation was occurring or is occurring, and then something happens that removes them from that risk or resolves that risk, there may be nothing more for us to do. But if they go from home into mental health setting and it's a short-term temporary type thing, we communicate with the folks at the psych hospital to try to come up with different interventions for if they return to that previous setting. You know, we do the best that we can to try to minimize a repeat of what caused that, linking them with as many resources as possible, you know, and working with the psych hospital. But if it was kind of like be some situations where that placement was the thing, you know, was the service, was the resolution to what was occurring.
Somebody else said, what is the rule about requiring a release of information in order to communicate with APS? I hear from my local AOS a lot, they cannot talk to me without a valid release.
So We have a section I can share. I can pull that up and I can send it to you and share it with folks about, you know, the sharing of information between the two entities. That
would work.
And did you say from an ALF? Did you say like a assisted living facility, or?
It says AOS. I don't know what AOS is.
Oh, okay. They might have meant APS because the L's kind of close to the P. It might just be a typo.
Yeah, APS, that's right.
So release of information between the CSB and APS. Okay. I'll send that to you and you can share it with the folks. Okay.
Awesome. Somebody else asked, what is the role of APS if the individual already has a legal guardian? It's believed that legal guardian is not acting in their best interest.
Again, you know, it depends on the situation and what all is going on in that situation, but we go out and we investigate it just like we would any other one. If the alleged perpetrator is the guardian or conservator, you know, they actually are treated as such, and we interview them just as we would any other alleged perpetrator. If it's determined that we have a preponderance of evidence to show that they are abusing, neglecting, or exploiting that person, we may have to pursue getting an alternate guardian or conservator and having them removed as the guardian and conservator.
The last question I'm seeing, which I believe you answered earlier in your presentation, is how is capacity determined?
Oh, okay. Yes, I did address that, or at least I attempted to. We assess it when we go out and are interviewing the client, but we also reach out to any medical professionals that are involved with the client. If needed, we try to get a neuropsych eval, you know, a complete neuropsych eval. We get information from any of the doctors or specialists that they may be seeing, or at least we attempt to. Sometimes the doctors are what might even hold up, you know, us being able to complete investigations when we're trying to get information from them.
Somebody else is saying, sorry for my child.
I think he's
what is the role? What is the role of APS if the person is in Eastern State Hospital is unable to identify their financial information?
What is the role? What is the role of APS in when someone's at Eastern State, and what was the last part?
And unable to identify their financial information?
Yeah, I mean, that can be a tough one. That can be a tough one. So I'm not exactly sure. Information is like a big thing here. If you're talking, are you talking about their income? Are you talking about all of it? Are you talking about property that they might own, resources? You know, if they have, if they need a guardian and conservator, that's kind of what the role that they take on, because they get the guardianship and the conservatorship. They're able to, you know, get more information sometimes. But, you know, if the person's able to be verbal, you know, you could even just call different banks with them saying, you know, if they find out you have an account there, they can give them verbal permission. You can have them sign forms that lets them release information to you. We have relationships with the banks. They're not mandated reporters, but they are encouraged to report to us with Social Security. I think you know, there's probably ways to try to figure out what their income might be if they get Social Security. You know, sorry. I think there, are there other questions?
There are a couple more. I'm going to stand up.
Okay.
Is there a role of APS that addresses those that are in consideration and considered discharged from state hospital without proper discharge procedures in place, or procedures that have not taken place, or is that neglect?
Let me see. I think that if you're talking, considered discharge from the state hospital without proper discharge procedures, that's definitely one of the things that we would probably refer to DBHDS. You know, if they're not following their discharge protocols.
Mm-hmm.
The staff, I mean, at hospital not doing the proper discharge planning.
Okay. There's another one that says, what happens if the individual has 3 guardians that are not in agreement and the main guardian, primary caregiver, is not acting in the best interest of the individual due to their own cognitive challenges from aging?
I'm not sure I've ever heard of guardians, but you know, I would definitely report that to Adult Protective Services if, you know, there's something like that happening where the primary caregiver not acting in the best interest and you can't get them all to agree. I mean, that I can't even speak to that. You know, really, I haven't ever had that happen, but you know, I would think that they may have to look at having another guardian named, possibly. There would be so many pieces and parts to that, so many discussions to that, so many trying to figure out why they won't agree, trying to figure out what's going on with the primary caregiver, that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, trying to figure out why they won't let the other guardians come in and help. Why? I mean, there's so many things that could be going on there.
Somebody said, how do you determine when a case is founded?
When there is a preponderance of evidence, that there is abuse, neglect, or exploitation that is occurring, has recently occurred, or is at risk, that would be founded.
Let's see.
Are there any other questions?
The last question that I can see is, if you report a case anonymous, how would you know about the case?
You wouldn't. You know, you really wouldn't, because there's no way for them to say, if you say anonymous and you don't provide your name and address, there's no way that they could send you the notification letter at the end of the investigation to basically let you know what the outcome was. You know, going with that though, a lot of times people are mostly afraid to provide their identity because they're afraid that someone's going to find out that they're the ones that made that report. So I would like to reiterate that your identity is kept confidential. You know, the worker is not going to be sharing who you are, what you do, where you came from, what your relation is, you know, any of that with the people that are involved unless you explicitly express that, permission to do so. And, most of the time it's good for the worker to know who the reporter is, because during the intake process, when you're calling the hotline or when you're calling the local department, if they have, different folks doing intake that don't necessarily work in APS, or maybe they work in APS, but they're not an investigator, they don't always know a lot of the questions that can be asked of the reporter that can provide some pretty valuable information. And so, if you provide your identity and your phone number, at least the investigator that's looking into the issues and allegations could call you and ask you some additional questions. I know a lot of times even when workers call me and say, hey, I have this case, da 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 da, I usually have more questions before I have actual answers, because there are so many pieces and parts to things that, you really kind of need to get in there and get a little bit more before you can really provide an answer. So providing your identity is helpful, actually. But I understand why people want to make anonymous reports.
Are there any other questions that need to go in the chat? I'm not seeing that many more.
I actually just realized how I could click on them too. Let me run through them real quick. I think I see one that says, is there an avenue for the reporter to pursue if they disagree with APS decisions? You can make another report. If you have some additional information, I'm assuming that you're talking about once you get the letter, if it says like unfounded, but you feel like enough information to say that it would be founded, you can make another report. You can try to call the reporter to talk to them. You could call me. I take constituent concerns and complaints. That's one of my main roles in what I do here. So that could help you there. Let's see. When a facility refuses to accept an individual back to the facility, what is the role of APS? I'm not sure that really is our role, because that's more of a licensing thing. The Office of Licensure and Certification, if it's a nursing facility, DSS licensing, if assisted living facility. Having worked in nursing facilities in my past life, I can say that there have been, I know that the facility that I worked at, there were times that we really just couldn't meet the person's needs based on their behaviors and things like that. And so we would let the hospital know as soon as possible if that was something that was the case. But really, we tried to go and accept those people back. But I do know that there are times that facilities do that, and it's tough. It's tough all the way around on all people, and especially the client if they've been at that facility a long time, because that's their home. So it can be rough on them. Let me see. I think I got them all. I'm not sure. Am I missing any?
I think you might have gotten them all. I see one more. I don't know if you answer this one or not. I'm trying to go through and hit all of them.
Okay.
Is there an avenue for the reporter to pursue if they disagree with APS decisions?
Yeah, so that's the one. Like if you have more information and you want to make another report, you can do that. You can call me. I take constituent concerns and complaints. That's one of my primary roles. And then what I do is I look into it and I contact the supervisor or the worker, and then get back to you on that. it's tough when you're dealing with adults, right? Because it really does go back to their decisions. And I know even when I was working in the nursing facilities, we might have people that would refuse medications and refuse to take showers and refuse all these things, and maybe they were lacking capacity, and maybe we did get a guardian and conservator, and maybe they still refuse their showers. You can't, just having that guardian doesn't make them take their medicine. It doesn't make them take that shower. I mean, sometimes it helps to get the guardian and conservator and things, but sometimes it's still tough to when you're dealing with certain behaviors and things. Is there anything else? I know, we do still have a little bit more time if needed, and I hope that I've been able to answer some of the, more global questions that you all kind of had about adult protective services. And my contact information is here. If you think of anything after, this presentation today, you can email me, you can call me, and I'll point you in the right direction the best way that I know how.
Yeah, I don't think there are any other questions, but I appreciate your time, Carrie, and all the information that you shared with us. I know it's greatly appreciative, and the chat pulling up with thank you. So it has been very helpful. Following up, I will send out the recording to everybody. Is it okay if we share your slides, or would you prefer for us not to share slides with folks?
Oh, no, yeah, you can definitely share the PowerPoint with everyone. And the information that I get regarding that, sharing of information, I can, email that to you, and you can disseminate that to the folks as well.
Yeah, that would be great. Well,
okay.
Well, I will go ahead and stop the recording, and I appreciate everybody's time.